My name's Tony Eva, and today I'm in the home of Stephen Skelton, who's kindly invited us in to talk about the 2018 English wine-growing season. So, Stephen, thanks so much for having us today.
Well, it's good to meet you.
And you. So today we're going to be looking back at the 2018 English wine-growing season. And before we get to it in detail, I think it's a bit of an open secret that it's been quite a special year this past year. So how does it compare to your experience in the English wine industry?
Well, going back, of course, the hottest years have been things like 76, which I wasn't involved in at all. 82 was very good, 83 was very good, and of course 2003. Those are the sort of hottest years in my 45 years. 2018, I think, was a combination of 82 and 83 together. So 82 is very good quality, but not amazing quantity. But 83 was amazing quantity, perhaps even bigger than this year.
Okay, well, let's look now in detail and see how we arrived at this special year. So if we go back to March, the jet stream was such that it was allowing very cold air to come in from Siberia. So we had the so-called beast from the east and beast from the east too. So a lot of vineyards, I think we've got a clip here from Bidenden, were covered in snow for parts of March.
Yeah, well, that's always a good thing, really, because it delays the onset of bud burst, which obviously, if you have a late bud burst, you're less likely to have a frost damage. Normally, good years are associated with an early bud burst, and this was unusual. This year was unusual because it was a good year, but associated with quite a late bud burst. But it did mean, of course, we didn't lose anything to frost, and thus that's one of the reasons why the crop is so large.
We also had a lot of precipitation, so at the time, I think a few wine growers were thinking this wasn't so good. They couldn't get out in the vine.
No, my normal planting season is the last week of April to the middle of May. This year, I had two sites I couldn't even get on to plough. I don't think they were ploughed until May the 7th. It was just too wet.
And I think in retrospect, probably that rain that we saw in March and April was probably a good thing because we had such...
yeah, and then people kept on saying, should I water? And I said, no, there's plenty of moisture in the soil. You dig down, 9 inches and there's moisture there. Yes, which all came from that late April, early May rainfall.
Now also in March, Camel Valley was the first wine producer to be awarded a royal warrant. How important do you think that is as recognition for the English wine?
Well, it's something Bob Lindo from Camel Valley has worked on, so it didn't come to me as a surprise, but I think it's a great accolade and it's a good thing for the industry.
Yeah, it has to be. So apart from all the rain that we had in March and April, March being very cold, and then April we got conditions which were warmer and much closer to the long-term average.
Yeah, sort of third week of April we got up to sort of 23, 24, I think, and gave a hint of things to come. And then I say we're from going sort of 2-3 weeks late, we went to 2-3 weeks early, and I think flowering started in Chardonnay, which is very unusual, on June the 10th or June the 12th, I think it was, which was the earliest, A, the earliest for Chardonnay, and B, the earliest for vines full stop,
yes.
Which was amazing.
I think it was about 60 days between bud burst and flowering, and normally it would be much longer than that.
The 3 weeks of good weather before flowering and the 3 weeks of good weather after flowering completely made the vintage, because it set the architecture of the bunch, the size of the bunch, allowing the berries to grow big, and the bunch sizes this year were amazingly large.
If we could just look in a bit more detail at that flowering season, it was exceptionally warm during that June period. There was hardly any rainfall and wind speeds were lower than normal, so presumably that was pretty much ideal conditions.
Yes, I mean, the quieter it is in terms of wind, the more photosynthesis takes place, the more the vines like it, the more flowering takes place, the quicker the flowering. I think we had 3 days in June of 30 degrees consecutively, which is almost unheard of. Yes. And as I say, the inflorescences, they need, if the inflorescence is large, the bunch can expand and the berries can expand within the bunch. The bunch weights this year, I haven't got the figures yet, but I'm suspecting they're going to be 175, maybe even slightly higher than that, which is, that accounts in itself for much of the large increase in crop.
Now, by the end of June and the early July, I think it was becoming pretty clear that this had the potential to be a pretty exceptional harvest, as you're describing. And I think you were one of the first to call it and talk about it being perhaps an exceptional harvest and an early harvest as well.
Yeah, well, the conditions were just so brilliant, and I know that it's the 3 or 4 weeks before and after flowering that make all the difference. You know, there's sort of 2 weeks either side. In fact, we had sort of good 3 weeks either side, which made it even more important. And of course, you know, I'm tracking the amount of vineyards that have been planted, and I know that this year we've seen a lot more vineyards come into cropping because of the planting that took place, you know, sort of 3 or 4 years ago. So again, I knew in terms of global size, it was going to be much bigger than anything we'd ever seen.
Mm-hmm. And let's just go back then to a second to you talking about new vineyards, and I think we've got some footage here of some vineyards being planted. Do you have an estimate of how much new vineyard has gone in 2018?
In 2018, we had about 1.5 million vines planted. So we're still sort of working on the numbers, to be honest. It's quite slow to get people to report. Yes. But certainly, this year was the biggest planting season we've ever seen. This coming year, I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to be quite so large, although it will be substantial. There'll be at least 1 million vines.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's head back now to 2018 growing season into July, which was the second warmest July that England has on record, dating back to 1910. And I think we've got a clip here from the Swaniford estate in Devon. And we can see then that the vines are looking very vibrant and very healthy. Conditions are looking pretty ideal, I think, across a lot of vineyards.
And there was still plenty of water left in the soil. Even though it was hot, no vines seemed to suffer from drought stress.
Yeah. Now, July was also very dry. June we've talked about as being exceptionally dry. And so we almost had the first vineyard wildfire at Harrow and Hope.
Did we? I didn't know that.
Yeah, we've got some images here, and you can see that it got really very close. I think they must have been holding their breath. I think the firefighters got a crate of wines for their good work. And the other thing that happened in July was Sherry Spriggs was awarded Sparkling Winemaker of the Year. Show from Nightingale.
Yeah, that was great news. I think she's well deserved. You know, they're producing some amazing wines, and I interviewed her recently for my new book. And you know, I wrote it up, and I was, you know, by the time I finished, I was perhaps overpraising her. But I think praise where praise is due. It's good that she got that accolade.
So back to the growing season, and August continuing the same trend, much warmer than the long-term average. And the Met Office was reporting that for the meteorological summer, that's from the 1st of June to the 31st of August, it was the warmest summer on record.
Was it? Yeah.
So that's really pushing the vines forward.
Yeah, and we got early harvest. I mean, there were people. We started picking in 82, as I remember. I picked some Seagaraber, and I think it was August bank holiday, so it would have been sort of the last few days of August. And again, I think 1 or 2 people started picking around that same sort of time this year.
Yeah. And then September, slightly cooler, much closer to the long-term average for 81 to 2010. But again, it was pretty dry, so this really helped harvesting.
Yes, I mean, I think, you know, the vines, as I say, weren't suffering from drought stress. People were sort of taking grapes into the winery and being told these are too ripe, which was a bit of a shock. There was very little under 10% natural alcohol. And since 2000, certainly, there's been almost, you know, every year we've seen people with alcohols in the 10, 11, 12% range.
So October, normally you'd be harvesting well into the end of the month, and this year it was all done and dusted.
Yes and no. I mean, I think most people picked a little bit too early. 1 or 2 of my clients held on, for still wine particularly. I've got one client who picked Chardonnay, I think towards the end of, it was about 28th of October, at 13.5% natural alcohol. So the heavy crops certainly delayed things ripening in some vineyards, and which is good, I think. So it allows flavours to develop. The trouble is if you get high sugars early, the flavours don't develop. Fine for sparkling wine, but not for still wines. So it'll be interesting to see what the Chardonnays do this year, and interesting to see obviously what the reds do, particularly Pinot Noir.
Now, in terms of yield, I've been tracking reports on social media, and people have been saying an increase in yield of anywhere between 40% to well over double compared to 2017.
Oh yeah, double, treble, even quadruple. Yeah, I think vineyards which don't normally do very well so they may be picking in the sort of 1 to 2 tons per acre area. They probably did better in terms of percentage-wise increase than vineyards that normally do quite well. So my clients who normally get 3 to 4 tons to the acre were getting sort of 6 to 8. I think the average yields this year, I'm working on around 4.5 tons per acre, I think average over the whole lot, which is double what we've had before.
I mean, one question that keeps coming to me is about prices of English wine, and a number of people have suggested, well, we've got this bumper crop, so shall we going to see prices drop?
I think in still wine, definitely, because still wine producers are faced with the dilemma of having to get rid of their, to empty their tanks before the next harvest comes along. You can't afford to double up your tank space. And so we will definitely be seeing the lower end price-wise wines coming in probably around under £10. I would think in the sort of £7.99 to £8.99 price range, something like Chapel Downs, Flint Dry, Denbigh's, the larger volume popular wines. I think they'll be lower priced, and I think they'll sell well. I think the big supermarkets will get hold of them and they'll push them. Sparkling wines, of course, it's a 3-year, 4-year cycle for most people. One of the problems I do foresee, though, is that people who have not yet had a good crop up until now, so people for whom this year is their first real crop, second year crop, they are faced with having to find £4 to £5 a bottle to get that wine into bottle and into a crate, into a cage, into a building, air conditioning, insurance, heating, lighting, etc., etc. So for some sparkling wine producers, there'll be huge cash flow problems, and I suspect a lot of them will be wanting to sell their wine in bulk.
I think almost all the wine growers have been saying that the quality of their grapes this year is exceptional, but I don't remember a year when they said they were bad.
No, it's funny. We talk about good and bad vintages in a sort of European context. In fact, I think most years in this country, our vintages are pretty good in terms of quality. It's just the quantity that goes up and down a lot. And of course, if you're making sparkling wine, you've got so many more things that happens to the wine over and above still wine. You've got the aging process, you've got the dosage, you've got other things, blending, which makes a lot of difference to the final quality of the end product. But the volume this year and the quality has surprised us all.
Yeah, well, it sounds like next year those people who are keen on drinking English wines are going to have, at least for still wines, are going to have a good...
I think so, yeah.
Great, well, on that piece, let's end it, and thanks again.
Okay.